A bloodied note pinned to the trough read, "Next time we don't miss." The saloon is seconds away from erupting into gunfire. Will Doc Holliday draw first, or will Tombstone witness its first blood under his hand and the knife-wielding cowboy lunges across the table? Doc's hand hovers at his revolver. Who will draw first? The desert wind carried the sting of dust and heat as the small frontier town of Tombstone, Arizona, shimmered under the noonday sun. Wagons creaked along the dirt road, saloon doors swung lazily on their hinges, and somewhere a blacksmith hammered iron, each strike echoing like a gunshot. Tombstone was alive, but always on edge, its heartbeat a mixture of greed, whiskey, and the ever-present threat of violence. Into this restless town rode a man draped in black, his hat pulled low and his coat brushing against his boots. He did not sit tall in the saddle like a cowboy, nor did he move with the swagger of an outlaw. His posture spoke of weariness, his frame lean, his face pale as if chased by sickness. Yet his eyes, icy, calculating, and sharp as a gambler's blade, gave him away as someone not to be trifled with. His name was John Henry Doc Holliday, once a dentist back east, now a gambler and gunfighter, and perhaps one of the most dangerous men ever to drift across the Wild West. His cough rattled as he dismounted outside the Oriental Saloon, spitting blood discreetly into a kerchief before tucking it away. Death stalked him daily, but Doc carried himself as though he were the one holding the scythe. Inside the Oriental, the air was thick with cigar smoke, whiskey fumes, and the rattle of poker chips. Men turned their heads as Doc strode to the bar, his hand resting lightly on the ivory grip of the Colt peacemaker at his side. He ordered a whiskey neat. No ice. No words. His presence commanded silence, until one fool decided to break it. "You look half dead already, stranger," a cowboy sneered from the card table, his boots propped arrogantly on the chair opposite. "Might as well lay down now before someone helps you the rest of the way." Laughter rippled around the table, harsh and mocking. Doc's gaze slid over to the man with a calm that felt more dangerous than anger. He did not raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Son," he drawled, his southern accent cutting through the smoke-filled air like a blade, "I may be half dead, but I've lived twice as dangerous as you ever will." The cowboy's grin faltered, but pride was a deadly thing in Tombstone. Chairs scraped as the man stood, hand drifting toward the revolver at his hip. The saloon seemed to freeze, every eye locked on the stranger and the outlaw about to collide. Doc raised his glass, sipped his whiskey slowly, and set it down with precision. His right hand hovered inches above the revolver. His pale lips curled into a ghost of a smile. And then, silence, broken only by the sound of the man's thumb cocking his gun. The saloon is seconds away from erupting into gunfire. Will Doc Holliday draw first, or will Tombstone witness its first blood under his hand? The tension from the saloon standoff hung thick in the air, but the cowboy's hand twitched too slow. Before his revolver even cleared the holster, Doc's Colt was already leveled at his chest, steady as a surgeon's hand. A single, cold click of the hammer was enough. The outlaw froze, sweat dripping down his temple as the room held its breath. Doc's pale eyes never wavered. "Sit down," he murmured. The words were soft, but carried the weight of death. The man obeyed, collapsing back into his chair, face drained of color. The crowd exhaled all at once, as if the walls themselves had been holding their breath. Doc spun his revolver once before holstering it with casual ease, then returned to his whiskey as though nothing had happened. That was Doc Holliday, always calm, always one heartbeat away from violence. Minutes later, Doc slid into a seat at the poker table, his slender fingers shuffling cards with a gambler's grace. His reputation at the felt was as sharp as his aim. He could read a bluff like he could read the fear in a man's eyes before a duel. Chips clinked as he dealt himself into the game. "Gentlemen," he drawled, "shall we make this interesting?" The night deepened, and whiskey flowed as freely as the wagers. Doc's cough rattled every so often, but it never broke his concentration. He played the table like a fiddle, winning hand after hand, his pile of chips growing as tempers flared around him. Men cursed, muttered about his luck, but Doc knew it wasn't luck. It was precision, the same precision that guided his hand in a gunfight. But fortune always paints a target. By midnight, one burly cowboy slammed his fist on the table, eyes bloodshot and fists trembling. "You're cheatin', Doc," he barked, spitting tobacco juice onto the floor. His hand went to his knife. Doc leaned back in his chair, unbothered, flicking ash from his cigar. "Cheatin', sir? No, but I do admit to playin' better than you." His grin was razor-sharp, daring the man to act. The cowboy stood, blade gleaming under the lamplight, the room alive with shouts and scrambling boots. Doc rose slowly, drawing himself up despite his frail frame, his hand drifting once again to the Colt at his side. The crowd knew what was coming. Tombstone's night was about to end in blood. The knife-wielding cowboy lunged, but Doc moved faster. His revolver cleared leather in a blur, the barrel flashing once. The blade clattered to the floor as the man staggered, clutching his bleeding arm. The saloon erupted. Chairs overturned, glasses shattered, men shouting over the crack of gunfire. Doc's calm never faltered. He stepped forward, boot crushing the knife, his revolver aimed steady at the man's chest. "You've had your chance," Doc said flatly. But instead of finishing him, he holstered the Colt and turned his back. Mercy wasn't common in Tombstone, and that act rattled the room more than a killing would have. To Doc, it wasn't about blood, it was about control. He didn't just outshoot men. He unmade them. As whispers spread of the pale gambler who never flinched, his past came alive in hushed tones. Once, back in Georgia, he'd been a respectable dentist, tending teeth with steady hands. Then came the coughing fits, the death sentence of tuberculosis, and a choice: die quietly or live dangerously. He chose the West, where life burned fast and men remembered your name if your draw was quicker than theirs. And so Doc Holliday was born, not just a gambler, but a man who treated the gun as his final instrument. In the saloon doorway, 3 Rough Riders appeared, their eyes fixed on Document. The real trouble had just arrived. The trio at the door wore dust-stained coats, spurs glinting in the lamplight. Cowboys, known troublemakers from the rustler gangs that plagued the territory. They didn't shout or draw. They just stared, letting silence do the talking. The barkeep leaned in close to Document. "That's McClary's boys. Heard they've been looking for a chance to spill blood." Doc sipped his whiskey unfazed. "Then they should learn to choose better company." His voice carried, sharp as a blade, drawing chuckles from gamblers and gasps from drunks. The Outlaws didn't rise to the bait, not yet. They turned and left, boots thudding against the wood floor, but their glares promised this wasn't the end. The saloon buzzed with nervous energy. Folks knew those men would be waiting in the shadows, and Doc Holliday's name had just been written into their ledger. Outside, the cowboys mounted up and rode into the dark, one muttering, "He won't last the week." By morning, Tombstone was alive with gossip. Doc Holliday had bested a knife fighter, insulted the McClary boys, and still managed to walk away breathing. Some called him reckless, others called him mad, but all agreed he was dangerous. That night, another test came. The saloon's piano barely drowned out the heavy boots stomping toward his table. A scarred cowboy leaned close, whiskey on his breath. "Word is you're faster than a rattler, Holliday. Care to prove it?" Doc tapped his cards on the table, not looking up. "Friend, you're welcome to try. But I warn you, it'll be the last thing you ever wager." The challenge wasn't bravado, it was certainty. The crowd hushed, chairs scraping as men cleared the space between them. The cowboy's hand trembled over his holster. Doc's never moved, but his eyes pinned the man like a snake about to strike. The outlaw's fingers twitched, the moment stretched thin as glass, and then his hand dropped for his gun. The sound cracked like thunder. One heartbeat and it was done. The outlaw's gun never cleared his holster. Doc's bullet had already found its mark. Smoke curled lazily from the gambler's Colt as the man crumpled to the sawdust floor. Screams erupted, gamblers diving under tables, glasses smashing. But Doc stood unmoving, shoulders squared, eyes scanning for the next threat. His cough returned, harsh and rattling, a grim reminder that even the deadliest man in Tombstone was still human. The McClary boys burst in through the batwing doors, their eyes wild with rage at the sight of their comrade lying dead. Doc turned, gun still hot in his hand. "Care to join him?" he asked, voice calm as a Sunday sermon. Fingers reached for triggers. Tombstone was about to drown in lead. The chaos halted as another figure entered the saloon, a broad-shouldered lawman with cold eyes and a steady presence. Wyatt Earp. He strode forward, hand resting on his pistol, his badge glinting in the lantern light. "Enough!" Wyatt's voice cut through the madness. "There'll be no bloodbath tonight." He looked at Doc, then at the cowboys. "You want war, you'll get it. But not here. Not now." The McClary boys hesitated, rage battling fear. Finally, they spat curses and stormed out, vowing revenge. The room slowly exhaled, the piano striking up again in nervous notes. Wyatt Earp studied Doc Holliday, the pale gambler who had just stared down half a gang. "You've got a quick hand," he said quietly. And a quicker temper. Tombstone could use both. Doc smirked, lifting his glass. Well, Mr. Earp, it seems you and I may have more in common than I thought. Outside, the cowboys gathered in the shadows, swearing an oath. Doc Holliday would not live to see the week's end. The cowboys gathered in a dim shack on the outskirts of Tombstone, lantern light flickering across grim faces. Bottles clinked, cards lay forgotten on the table. This wasn't a night for play. The McClary boys nursed their pride and swore vengeance, their voices dripping with rage. He embarrassed us in front of the whole town, one snarled. Holliday won't leave Tombstone alive. Plans were whispered over whiskey and cigar smoke. Ambushes, back-alley knives, a bullet in the dark. The cowboys weren't men of honor. They were jackals, waiting for the moment their prey showed weakness. One of them grinned, slamming his fist on the table. Tomorrow night, we gut him like a hog. Doc Holliday walked Tombstone's quiet streets under a sliver of moonlight, boots crunching against gravel. He carried himself like a man unconcerned, though his hand brushed the revolver at his side. The desert night was never silent. It whispered of coyotes and trouble. From the shadows, 3 cowboys leapt, pistols flashing. Bullets tore splinters from the hitching posts, sparks lighting the darkness. Doc ducked, rolling behind a water trough, returning fire with deadly precision. One man screamed, clutching his leg, while the others cursed and retreated into the night. Doc stood, chest heaving, cough rattling his ribs. He had survived, but the message was clear. Tombstone was a battlefield now. A bloodied note pinned to the trough read, "Next time we don't miss." Dawn broke red over the Arizona horizon, painting the desert like a battlefield. Doc and Wyatt Earp rode out to scout the outskirts, their horses kicking up dust. The desert stretched vast and unforgiving, a place where bodies vanished and justice was slow to follow. They found one, slumped against a mesquite tree, bullet in his chest, a cowboy by his gear. Doc's eyes narrowed. They're sending a message. Wyatt dismounted, his face carved in stone. So are we. The Lawman's reputation for resolve was iron, but Doc's was fire, unpredictable, searing. Together, they made a dangerous pair. As they turned back, a rifle crack echoed across the canyon. Someone had them in their sights. The shot missed, but the meaning did not. By evening, posters nailed to Tombstone's posts bore Doc's likeness. Wanted dead or alive. A bounty hung heavy, big enough to tempt desperate men from miles around. Doc sat in the Oriental saloon, reading the poster with a thin smile. "Alive," he muttered, sipping whiskey. "They flatter me." But inside, he knew the noose tightened. His enemies weren't just the cowboys now. Every drifter, every hungry outlaw with an itchy trigger finger, might come knocking. Wyatt Earp warned him. "This town's about to turn into a powder keg. You need to watch your back." Doc raised his glass. "I always do." Outside, a shadow lingered by the saloon door, hand resting on a revolver. The trail of vengeance led into the canyons north of Tombstone, where the cowboys' hideout festered like a wound in the desert. Crude shacks leaned against red rock walls, horses tied and restless, rifles stacked by the fire. Doc scouted from the ridge, coughing into his kerchief, eyes cold as winter steel. He counted at least a dozen men, too many for one gambler's gun, even with Wyatt at his side. But Doc wasn't one to shy away from stacked odds. His mind churned not on escape, but on how to draw them out, split them apart, and cut them down one by one. From below, a voice carried up. "We know you're watchin', Holliday. You ain't leavin' this desert alive." Doc's pale lips curved into a smile as he whispered to himself. "Then let's play, gentlemen." Kate Elder sat by the window of their small room, the lamp casting long shadows on her face. She'd seen Doc stride through gunfire with a grin, but tonight, when he coughed into his handkerchief, she caught a glimpse of crimson. His illness was eating him alive. "John," she whispered, using his true name, "how long do you think you can keep this up? Fighting outlaws, chasing death." Doc leaned back, whiskey glass in hand, eyes hollow yet defiant. "As long as it takes. Men like the cowboys don't quit, Katie. Neither do I." But his voice faltered on the last word, the tremor betraying the storm inside. Kate touched his arm gently. "Or maybe you're not chasing them. Maybe you're chasing your own grave." At midnight, a shadow slipped into Doc's room at the Oriental Saloon. It was Ringo, his rival and mirror image in many ways, educated, sharp, and deadly. Ringo poured 2 drinks, uninvited. "You're wasting your life. Document Wyatt doesn't care if you die in his shadow. But the cowboys? We could use a man like you. Switch sides. and I'll make sure no bullet ever touches you again. Doc chuckled, the sound brittle. And here I thought you only wanted me 6 feet under. Their eyes locked like drawn pistols. For a moment, the room brimmed with unspoken respect and deadly promise. Ringo leaned close, his smile cutting. Think about it, Holliday. The desert doesn't forgive men who back the wrong side. The desert sky burned crimson under a swollen moon as Wyatt and Doc rode hard toward the canyons. Dust bit their throats, but neither slowed. Word had come of cowboys gathering for a strike on Tombstone. Every hoofbeat echoed like a war drum. Doc's chest rattled with each breath, yet he pressed forward, pale lips whispering. One last ride. Wyatt glanced at him, silent, knowing his friend was burning himself out like a candle in the wind. They crested a ridge. Below, campfires glowed like hell's own eyes, a dozen cowboys sharpening knives and loading rifles. Wyatt gritted his teeth. If we don't stop them tonight, Tombstone falls by dawn. The air was razor-thin, charged with violence as the first streaks of sunlight touched Tombstone's outskirts. Cowboys strutted down Fremont Street, pistols gleaming, boots heavy on the earth. Doc and Wyatt stepped forward, flanked by Virgil and Morgan Earp. The street stilled, every saloon girl, shopkeeper, and drifter watching from windows, breath caught in their throats. Doc's hand hovered near his Colt. His cough threatened to betray him, but his eyes were wildfire. Ringo tipped his hat from across the way, smirking. Then came the sound, the first revolver cocking back. Silence shattered in a storm of gunfire. Bullets ripped through the morning haze, shattering windows, tearing wood. Horses screamed, and Tombstone became a killing ground. Doc moved like a man possessed. His cough vanished, his weakness burned away in the furnace of battle. 2 cowboys fell in seconds, their guns clattering to the dirt. Wyatt fired steady, a wall of iron beside him, while Virgil and Morgan roared back against the storm. But for every outlaw that fell, another rose. The street grew slick with blood, gunsmoke thick enough to choke. And in the middle of it all, Doc laughed, a mad, rasping laugh, as if daring death to come for him. Across the smoke, Ringo's eyes locked on his, pistol raised, steady as stone. Gunfire still echoed like thunder down Fremont Street. Doc Holliday stepped through the smoke, eyes locked on Johnny Ringo. The world seemed to fall away, just 2 men, both gamblers, both killers, both ready to die. Ringo smirked, pistol steady. You're a dead man, Holliday. Sick lungs won't save you now. Doc coughed once, but his hand was lightning. His revolver flared, and the crowd gasped as Ringo's hat flew into the dust. A warning shot, perfect in its cruelty. I'm your huckleberry, Doc rasped. Ringo snarled and charged, guns blazing. As Doc and Ringo danced their deadly duel, chaos spread. Cowboys flanked from alleys, firing into the Earp's line. Morgan Earp fought like a lion, protecting his brothers with every shot. But fate is cruel in the West. A bullet tore into Morgan's back, dropping him to the dirt. Virgil roared in rage, dragging him into cover as Wyatt fired like a man possessed. Doc saw it all, fury boiling in his veins. His laughter died. The duel with Ringo became more than rivalry, it was vengeance. Morgan whispered to Wyatt, blood soaking his shirt. Don't let it end like this. The church bell tolled slow and heavy, echoing across the desert town. Tombstone gathered in mourning, hats in hand, faces grim. Morgan Earp lay in a pine box, his body wrapped in black cloth, his face pale but proud. Doc stood at the back, whiskey flask in hand, shadows under his eyes. He didn't pray, he never did, but his silence was louder than words. Wyatt stepped forward, voice shaking but iron. They've taken one of ours. We'll take all of them. As the bell rang again, Doc whispered under his breath, Ringo first. The sun bled red over the desert horizon as Wyatt, Doc, and a posse of vengeance-hungry riders saddled up. Dust clouds rose behind them, their shadows stretching like ghosts across the land. Doc swayed in the saddle, weaker than he led on, but his eyes burned with purpose. Kate rode beside him, whispering, This ride will kill you. He spat into the dust. Darlin', everything kills me. This way, I get to choose who dies with me. Ahead, smoke rose from a canyon camp, the cowboys' hideout. The posse thundered into the canyon, pistols spitting fire, rifles cracking from the ridges. Cowboys scattered, shouting curses as the narrow walls became a slaughter pen. Doc was death itself, coughing blood between shots, but dropping outlaws with every squeeze of the trigger. Wyatt fought at his side, their friendship forged in hellfire. The canyon ran with blood, screams echoing off the stone. But in the chaos, Ringo slipped away, vanishing deeper into the desert like a phantom. Doc staggered, coughing crimson, whispering through clenched teeth. "He's mine, Wyatt. Ringo's mine." The desert stretched endless, cruel as a hangman's rope. Heat shimmered off the rocks, vultures circled high, and the wind carried only silence. Doc Holliday rode at Wyatt's side, coughing blood into a rag, but his eyes never wavered from the horizon. "Ringo's out there," he rasped. "I can feel it." Wyatt frowned. "Doc, you're burning yourself out. You'll die before he does." Doc's grin was weak but sharp. "Then I'll drag him into the grave with me." From a canyon ridge, a single gunshot cracked. The ambush had begun. Bullets rained down from the cliffs, cowboys firing from hidden nests. Horses screamed, riders tumbled into the dust. Skeleton Gulch earned its name that day. Doc slid from his saddle, revolver blazing, crawling for cover as stone chips sprayed his face. His cough tore at his chest, but his hands were steady, deadly. He picked off 2 riflemen with shots so precise, the posse swore he was guided by death itself. Wyatt dragged him behind a boulder, shouting over the gunfire. "You'll kill yourself, Doc." Doc spat red and laughed. "Not yet." Above them, Ringo's voice echoed through the canyon. "Come and get me, Holliday." That night, after the posse drove the cowboys back, Doc lay by the campfire, pale as moonlight. Kate knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she pressed a cloth to his lips. "You're dying," she whispered, tears cutting through the dust on her cheeks. "Let Wyatt finish this. Come with me. Leave this madness before it buries you." Doc caught her hand, squeezing weakly. "Katie, this is who I am. I was born to gamble with death. And I ain't folding now." Her sobs echoed into the desert night, mingling with the crackle of fire. At dawn, Doc rose shakily, revolver in hand. Time to find Ringo. Johnny Ringo waited in the shadows of a mesquite grove, his face carved in stone, pistol gleaming. When Doc approached alone, the outlaw smirked. "Didn't think you had the strength, Holliday. You look half dead already." Doc coughed, a ragged, bloody sound, but his hand never shook. "Half dead, still alive enough to kill you, Ringo." They circled, boots crunching on dry earth, eyes locked. The world narrowed to 2 men and 2 pistols. Fingers twitched near holsters. The desert held its breath. The silence shattered. 2 pistols roared at once, smoke curling in the dawn light. For a heartbeat, both men stood, staring, as if neither knew who death had chosen. Then Ringo's gun slipped from his hand. His knees buckled, his body thudded into the dust, eyes wide in disbelief. Doc staggered, clutching his chest, coughing crimson into his sleeve. He whispered hoarsely, "Told you. I'm your huckleberry." The mesquite grove was silent again, save for the rasp of Doc's ragged breathing. Wyatt arrived too late, finding Doc swaying on his feet, half dead but victorious. "Doc, you can't survive this." The grove smelled of blood and gunpowder. Doc stood trembling, pale as a ghost, his Colt still smoking. Wyatt grabbed his arm, steadying him before he collapsed. "You did it," Wyatt muttered. "You put Ringo in the dirt." Doc gave a weak grin, his voice like broken glass. "Didn't do it for me, Wyatt. Did it for Morgan." The posse buried Ringo where he fell, the desert wind covering him in sand, as if the earth itself wanted him forgotten. But Doc's cough grew harsher, each breath a war he was losing. That night, as Wyatt slept, Doc whispered to Kate, "Take me away from here, before the Reaper rides up behind me." Months later, the saloons of Tombstone whispered Doc Holliday's name like a ghost story. But the man himself lay in a sanitarium in Glenwood Springs, far from the gunsmoke streets he once ruled. Doc stared at the ceiling, too weak to lift a pistol, too frail to shuffle a deck of cards. "Funny," he rasped to the nurse. "All my life I expected to die with my boots on. Yet here I am barefoot." Memories of Wyatt, Morgan, Kate, and every bloody duel drifted before him like smoke. For the first time, fear brushed him, because there were no more bullets, no more cards to play. Only silence. As dawn broke, Doc whispered one final word. "Katie." When news of Doc Holliday's death reached Tombstone, cowboys and townsfolk alike lifted their hats in silence. Wyatt Earp himself bowed his head, muttering, "Ride easy, old friend." But the legend refused to die. In saloons from Dodge City to Deadwood, men told stories of the pale gambler who faced death with a smile, who shot straighter sick than most men did in their prime, who looked the devil in the eye and laughed. Doc Holliday was no saint, no outlaw, no hero. He was all three, depending on who told the tale. Yet every story agreed on one truth. In the Wild West, there was never another quite like him. And so, in the dusty glow of memory, Doc Holliday's shadow still lingers, leaning at a poker table, a Colt on his hip, whispering with a grin. "I'm your Huckleberry." The West moved on, but the legend of Doc Holliday stayed behind, forever etched in gun smoke.